Welcome to Putback on SNY.TV. I'm Ian Begley, SNY NBA insider, and we're going all in on the Knicks offseason, the NBA offseason, with two fantastic guests. We've got ESPN front office insider Bobby Marks with us to break it all down. And we've got the man you know, and you probably love, because I love him, CP the Fanchise, Knicks Fan TV, here to talk with us for the next half hour or so, getting into all the details on this Knicks offseason. And let's start here, Bobby. Bradley Beal, do you think he could be a good fit for the Knicks where they are right now?
Well, I went on TV yesterday and threw out a hypothetical New York Knicks package. And I think where you look at it from New York, I think it's just a matter of like what you want to give in, right? And for me, it was, I'm just going to give him my expirings, whether it be Fournier. I'm going to exercise the Derrick Rose option that he's got a team option on, and then certainly make the money fit. And you can figure out what the draft picks are going to be. And I think, you know, even the value of that, it wasn't as high as it looks on paper, but I still had a hard time when you put that Beal number into the Knicks cap sheet, and then you got to figure out what to do with Immanuel Quickly, and Josh Hart's a free agent. All of a sudden, those numbers start to add up here, right? And you know, certainly for a guy who's going to make $57 million in the last year of his contract, that is a huge number. Now, the big question is that if the cost is low, okay, we're not talking Donovan and Michell cost from a year ago. If the cost is low, where it really is just, you know, expirings and salary filler, and it's not any of your core guys, and let's say you had to give them back that pick that you have of theirs in 2024, and maybe there's something else. Does it make sense for you from a basketball standpoint and from a financial standpoint? I think that's what the Knicks are going to have to kind of wrap their arms around here.
It's interesting because the finances, you know, I don't think Jim Dolan, I mean, there's a lot of criticism lobbed his way, some of it legitimate, but I don't think anyone who has worked for him has ever said he pinches pennies. He's going to write the checks if his executives feel like this is the right move. So, you know, you talk about the finances with Beal. We know how punitive it can get for teams, high spending teams with this new CBA. But I don't think Jim Dolan would hesitate to write the checks if Leon Rose, William Wesley, and the group felt that that was the way to go. Now, CP, what do you think about the Beal-Brunson backcourt, hypothetically?
Yeah, offensively, they give the league fits, you know, as two bucket getters in your backcourt. Bradley Beal is certainly that. And he's played with John Wall. He's played with Russell Westbrook. So he's played with ball dominant guard. He's played off of those guys. On the flip side, Jalen Brunson has shown that he can play with anybody and practically in any system. So offensively, I would love to see those two play together. But the key is defensively. How do those guys look? And you already have Jalen Brunson, who has been a target of opposing teams' offenses when it comes to testing him on the defensive end. Bradley Beal is not known to be a good defender either. He played 50 games last year. His durability is certainly questionable. And then when you put those two together on top of a ginormous contract north of $50 million, plus a no trade clause, that's a huge gamble here, because you could quite possibly be stuck with this guy throughout the length of his contract if he becomes, you know, an Antonio McDyess situation where he doesn't even play. And so, you know, if Bobby's scenario, if they can get him for cheap, it's still a risk that you might have to look into based on where the Knicks finished last year and where they're looking to go. However, I would have to imagine that Miami's going to be a front runner for him. And then you could have if the Knicks are on his list, you could have a bidding war between the Knicks and the Heat, similar to the Donovan Mitchell sweepstakes, and maybe that ups the price a little bit more. And so it'd be interesting to see where the Knicks go if that's the case.
Yeah, we know that Beal was among the high-profile shooting guards that the Knicks had talked about internally during the season as potential off-season trade targets. So the Knicks, at least I've discussed them. I assume there's a degree of interest if and when Beal becomes available, which we all assume that's going to happen, right? Now, we got into Beal on SNY.TV, an article looking at potential ramifications of that trade. We also have one on Karl-Anthony Towns. And Bobby, when you look at Towns, let's hypothetically say Knicks are trading for Towns. Is it automatic that they would trade a Mitchell Robinson to make room for Towns, or are you trading a Julius Randle to make room for Towns? What are your thoughts there?
I think it's probably I think it's a matter of where you figure Towns is going to play. Is he going to be your 5? I think that's what what New York would have to figure out here. So when you look at whether it be Robinson and then what else goes with it, and certainly it's going to be probably a Donovan Mitchell-esque type package, maybe not as much here. I think it's just a matter of fit. Or do you feel like, after watching him play with Gobert, does it make sense to have him play at the 4, more of a kind of more of a perimeter stretch 4 here? Does it make sense to include Randle in some type of deal here? So that's for me is, because I don't think it's right now, but I think eventually that he's a guy that we're going to be talking about long term as far as what his future in Minnesota is going to be, and how does he fit in New York or one of these other places here, and what's the cost going to be. And that's where I said, like, hey, if you can get Bradley Beal on the cheap and you can still keep some of your other things, you can keep some of your draft picks, you can keep your RJ Barrett of the world, you can keep a Mitchell Robinson, and then someone else becomes available down the road, and then you add that there. And I know where we're going with these new collective bargaining agreement rules, but the Knicks are I talked to both of you guys. I mean, they're in a position where they're not Miami. They don't have 2 max players on their contract, under salary. There's no Adebayo and Jimmy Butler here. So they're in a position to go out and load up if they want to on another 2 max guys to go with Brunson and kind of build out that roster there. So that's why, from the Beal perspective, as far as the low cost on him, and then certainly with if a player like Towns, which I would certainly think would cost New York more than in a Beal deal.
Right, and we know the connections are there organically between the Knicks and Karl Towns. Whether it's Gerson Rosas, now an executive with the Knicks, was the top basketball man in Minnesota during Towns' tenure. And also, obviously, Leon Rose was Towns' agent at CAA before he came over and took the president's job with the Knicks. He, William Wesley, very close with the Towns family. Karl Towns Sr. actually was at Leon Rose's first game as Knicks president. So the ties are there. I'm sure if it comes to fruition that Towns is available, the Knicks are going to consider it. CP, do you like the fit, whether it's Robinson going out or Randle going out, of Karl Towns being the Knicks' big move?
It's another one where offensively you like the fit. A good 3-point shooter, good floor spacer. He and Brunson would be a nice duo, especially in pick and roll, pick and pop situations. So offensively, you like the fit, but defensively, where does he put you? Because teams are going to put those 2 guys in a pick and roll. And we just seen in NBA Finals where, the Denver Nuggets, they were able to get over the top based on an improvement in their defense. Aaron Gordon, Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, Bruce Brown, Jokic was formidable. Jamal Murray was formidable defensively. You have to make sure that your pieces are complementing each other, not just on the offensive side, but defensively as well. And I just think having a Brunson in there, having RJ, who's pretty average, last year's defense took a step back, but he stepped it up there in the playoffs. And if you're adding a Randle to that mix, you're going to have to find some solid defenders there. And it'd be tough to lose Mitchell Robinson in that regard because he cleans up so many of their mistakes.
Bobby, the guys we're talking about, Towns, Beal, it seems like they're on a relatively long list of players who could be available as we approach the draft and then the offseason. You're the Knicks. Who are you targeting? I mean, who's at the top, near the top, at the top of your list? Like, what names are you looking at as guys who could potentially be available?
Yeah, you hit the head. I mean, I'm interested to see what happens in Portland with Damian Lillard, of course, as far as I think we may learn a lot more about the situation there after the draft. As far as what the Trailblazers do at number 3. It's funny. It's all the players that we're mentioning are all these players who have signed these third or fourth big max contracts, right? It's none of them that are my colleague Brian Windhorst terms of the fun max. The fun max is after your rookie contract, and you're still having it's like you guys like raising kids, right? 8 and 9 years old is great, right? Man, when they start to become teenagers, it's a different story here and stuff. And that's almost like how we're equating some of these players here, who whether it be from a cost standpoint, whether it be from a team like the Wizards, who have a different front office and are looking to basically tear down. I think what will happen is that New York, for at least this year, I think there's more competition for some of these players because, as we've talked about, these new CBAs, the teeth of these new CBA rules don't start until next year. So you would have eliminated a team like Miami or Golden State in a potential Bradley Beal sweepstakes, or Karl-Anthony Towns, or even a Damian Lillard here. So I think, those are the names, certainly to keep an eye on, just because of where each of the three organizations are, respectively.
I wonder too, I mean, just looking ahead, Giannis, Milwaukee, Giannis extension eligible. I think some teams are keeping an eye on that and seeing if Giannis is going to extend, which I think I'd be surprised if he were to do that. I know reportedly he wanted the head coach that they hired in Adrian Griffin, but I think teams are keeping an eye on that. But I don't know, like, if you can hold your fire based on the idea that maybe Giannis leaves the Bucks and comes to you. It's a risky proposition. Let's talk about guys who are on this roster right now. Bobby, I'm curious to hear your thoughts, value of Julius Randle in a trade, given his production, given his contract. How do you see it?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. I think I talked to both of you guys right after the series when they lost to Miami, and from a Knicks fan's perspective, it was like, can we just get him out of town, right? Like, send him away and never to be seen again here. And I think, listen, I think he's still on a really good contract. I think he's on a value contract. He's certainly coming off an All-NBA season. Yes, it was a disappointment as far as from a playoffs perspective here, but I think it is a good contract here. And if New York ever wanted to pivot, they can certainly do that. I think you're pivoting if you have a comfort level that Obi Toppin is your guy moving forward at the 4, and I don't have a good enough body of work to make that argument right now.
Yeah, we talked for a long time about how if it is Julius Randle, you move on from Obi Toppin, or if it is Obi Toppin, you move on from Julius Randle. I think, we're several years into this, and I would think just from a human perspective, not that you make these decisions based on relationships, but Obi Toppin, he's not being put in position to show his full talents, and you drafted him highly, and now he's behind Julius Randle for the past 3 years. So I would think that at least when teams call on Toppin, the Knicks will listen. But back to Randle CP, do you want to see number 30 in orange and blue opening night?
Well, if the Knicks can upgrade and it's going to cost them Julius Randle, then I would trade him. I don't think that they can win anything serious with Julius Randle as their first or second best player on the team. But I've said for since the offseason started that I don't see them, selling low on a Julius Randle trade. I don't think they're at that point yet. Having fell, 2 games short of the Eastern Conference Finals, I would have to think that they're going to look to move forward with him or tack on with Jalen Brunson there, and so that they can get back to that point or be even better. So, 24 points, 10 rebounds. It was solid production during the regular season. I feel like he contributed massively to them getting those 48 wins and making it to the playoffs. You have to give him a lot of credit there. And all-star, all-NBA player. And so he certainly helped this team tremendously last year. But I just think that there's a ceiling with him as one of their top guys, and I don't see them moving on if he's on this team.
Bobby, going back to Toppin and also Immanuel Quickly, because those two are extension eligible this summer. Quickly, go back to earlier this past season, the Knicks were getting calls talking about potential Quickly trades, and then he started to play really well going back to early December. I'm wondering if you are sitting there having to make decisions on these guys. Let's start with Quickly. Is he off limits to you in trades? Do you try to extend him? How do you approach that this offseason?
Well, we always see that there's a history regarding rookie extensions that the non-max players, we don't see any pickup until October, right? There's really never a priority here. I think last year, Keldon Johnson extended. The previous year, Robert Williams extended. But, if your name wasn't Zion Williamson and John Moran or even Darius Garland, you're basically kind of in a holding pattern here. I think for me with Quickly, I would be aggressive as far as to see if I can try to get him whether it be on a 4 or 5 year deal. The question is, are you willing to pay starter money for a player who's your sixth man, and is there a role for him coming, certainly in a starter, role. Extending him basically takes him off the board if there ever was a trade that materialized. So I think that's why maybe you're waiting a little bit until you get to training camp or to October to figure out what you want to do. And I think with Toppin, I think I'm not doing anything with him right now. He's the worst that can happen is he plays extremely well and you go into next season and he's a restricted free agent.
Yeah, you've written, Bobby, first of all, has a great series on ESPN.com breaking down every team's offseason, all the details involved in the offseason for your Knick piece, which everybody should check out. You wrote that you wouldn't extend Toppin unless, because there's not enough of a body of work there, too. You want to see more from him and a defined role from him. That makes all the sense in the world. And CP, when you're looking at another cornerstone of this franchise, RJ Barrett, I know that we're talking a lot about trades, but for you, based on what you saw in the postseason, would you like to see the Knicks keep him and have him continue to grow organically here, or are you dangling him out there? Let's say, hypothetically, in a Bradley Beal or Karl Towns deal.
I wouldn't trade RJ for those guys, but I wouldn't mark him as an untouchable either. If the right deal comes along, then you're going to have to consider it. But I did like the way that RJ Barrett finished the season. I like the way he played in that Heat series. For the most part, outside of Game 6, he was highly efficient. He made good decisions attacking the basket, made good reads off of those drives as well. They just have to figure out, his role in this offense, because he seems to play a lot better when the ball is in his hands, when his usage is up there. So how he manages to be, either that second guy off of Brunson and Randle is going to be key going into year 5. I think this is year 5 for RJ Barrett. So I like the way he played. The consistency is always going to be the biggest question mark for him. But to me, bring him in for another year of maturity. He's shown that he can handle it on the big stage, and just they need to solidify his role in the offense a little bit more.
Yeah, Bobby, that extension kicks in this coming season, and we all reported on it. Utah asking about Barrett in deals for Donovan Mitchell, whether that was to keep him there, take a look at him, or move him to another team. Who knows? But with Barrett, do you think that his trade value around the league was impacted at all by what I thought was a solid playoff performance after a rough shooting start? Do teams take that into account? Do they weigh that heavily? That small sample size when you're talking about trading for a player?
Well, listen, out of the extensions that were last year, whether it be Jordan Poole, Tyler Hero, or RJ Barrett, I think the Barrett number is probably the best value out of those 3 years. Certainly what's happened in Golden State with Poole and then Hero coming off the injury, although he had a really good year. I mean, it's 17.5% of the salary cap. It's a good, really good contract here that's got a lot of unlikely bonuses that have been built in, and he's going into year 5. He's a big wing. You never really want to give up on young players like that. Certainly I want to see that 31% number jump up to 37. I mean, you get that up to 37, 38, 43.4 up to 45%. As long as things are moving in the right direction, he's got a lot of value, not just to the Knicks and throughout the league. And, as you said, I wouldn't put him untouchable, but man, he's got, if you're looking at this roster, whether, certainly with Jalen and, how it's, Jalen, RJ, Quickly, Grimes, those are your cornerstone guys to kind of build around.
I got a theory, and I want to pose it to you guys because we're talking about trades. We know because Knicks Governor James Dolan's on the record as saying one of the reasons he brought Leon Rose and William Wesley in was to acquire a star. My theory is if you bring in a player who is going to take shots, going to have the ball in his hands, take your pick, the guys we've been talking about. Can you do that and also have Jalen Brunson, RJ Barrett, Julius Randle in the same lineup, essentially? Or does it have to be sending out either Randle or Barrett if you're bringing in that big name player? I would assume that you can't have all four of those guys in the same lineup. It's got to be Randle or Barrett going out to bring another guy in. Bobby, what do you think?
I agree. I mean, I think certainly we talked about Beal. I think you can hold on to both those guys, and and as far as use them for another deal. But I think if Lillard ever became available, or if Towns ever became available, then I think it's one of those two guys that would certainly have to be, part of any package, just because the numbers that from a salary standpoint, it just starts to add up here, and eventually. Next offseason, Jalen Brunson's rookie extension. I mean, not rookie, veteran extension eligible here. That's going to be, that we've talked about that declining contract at whatever, $25 million. Like that's going to go back up again, in a few years from now. So I do think, if a marquee guy becomes available, that Barrett or certainly Randle now become expendable.
CP, what are your thoughts on that? Does it have to be one of those two guys out if you bring somebody else in?
Yeah, it would. There's only one ball. And so, and like I said with RJ Barrett in the previous segment, him playing off ball is not necessarily ideal. And so there would have to be a lot of sacrifice involved. The guys would have to adjust their games. Is Julius Randle a guy who could handle another high usage player coming in here? Is he a guy that can impact the game with getting the ball less? Can he play on both ends of the floor and be engaged if he's not involved offensively as he has been in years past? I think those are the questions that you have to think about. So nevertheless, if they did get a top tier star, even a superstar, one of those guys may have to go just for the sake of balance and the complementary pieces on the team.
Bobby, you talked about Brunson's descending deal after the season that he had, year one of that contract. Is it accurate to say that that's one of the best contracts in the league right now? I mean, if you were ranking solid contracts, big money contracts that are solid, where would you put his, generally speaking?
Yeah, from big money contracts, it's probably one of the great contracts out there, one of the great value contracts out there. Certainly, where they have him, from a number standpoint, and certainly as a descending number, and that's why, we're going to hear a lot about Fred VanVleet this offseason, who is going to decline that player option. I mean, I don't know if I can pay him more than what Jalen Brunson is getting on the market, and I'm sure he probably will get a bigger contract. I mean, that's the reality. And I think if you ask me, who would you rather have, VanVleet or Brunson right now, I think I would say Jalen Brunson. I probably wouldn't say that maybe 2 years ago here. And, there's a difference between paying Fred $33 million and paying Jalen $25 million. And that's a difference. And it's a great, as I outside of the, what we saw in Miami with Gabe Vincent there, who was on basically a minimum and is going to get paid, that's going to be a nice number. That the Jalen number is, it's one of the great free agent signings I think we've seen in a long time. As far as free agency is so hard. I mean, because you're basically taking another player from a different situation, certainly Jalen being in Miami 4 years, and bringing him into an organization. And I know it helped having Leon, who, certainly represented him at one time, and Worldwide West, who's familiar, and certainly his dad, Rick, there. From a comfort level here, but we see more free agents miss on big number contracts than actually make it here. And for Jalen, I mean, they've got him on, as I said, a great number, and he's a terrific young player.
CP, one of the most passionate Knicks fans I know. As you're listening to Bobby, are you pumping your fist under the table there? Are you getting excited just because of the way he put that contract in context?
It's an absolute steal, man. An absolute steal. Something the Knicks have gotten right, and Dolan wanted Leon and those guys to bring in the star. Well, Jalen Brunson's star was certainly on the big stage, especially in the playoffs, and what he did, getting them past the Cavs and being the one guy that could solve that Heat defense. I mean, that Heat defense was stifling throughout their playoff run, but Jalen Brunson certainly had no problem. So we have one piece. It's just, while he's here on this manageable contract, the Knicks are going to have to look to take a risk down the road. And you look at all the options out there, from Towns to Beal to Levine. There's risk with all these guys. There's injury risk. Can these guys get it done? Is the contract too big? There's risk with all these guys. But I don't think the Knicks can stand pat. You're going to put a lot of pressure on Jalen Brunson to get it done by himself here. I don't think that's fair to him. You're going to have him have ice packs on his knees like Patrick Ewing in a couple of years, So they got to put some more talent around him so that they could try to get further than they did this year.
And CP, I think also the risk sometimes comes with, it always doesn't have to be an all-in move, right? It doesn't have to be basically like throw everything to the middle here. And I think we've saw this past year how Denver has been able to construct their roster here. There was never an all-in move for them. The Aaron Gordon trade in 2021, it cost them 2 number ones, and it cost them Gary Harris. The KCP trade a year ago cost them Will Barton and Monte Morris here. And then the other 3 players, certainly with Jokic, Murray, and Porter, were drafted, and Bruce Brown was a free agent signing here. So, yes, there is no Jokic on this team, and certainly Jamal Murray is a high-level player. But sometimes those singles, double type ones that we were not talking about right now, and a year from now, I'll be like, man, where'd that guy come from? Those are more important than basically going out and getting that former All-Star here, because as you said, the risk is, man, if it doesn't work out, I got one swing at it. I got one. Look at Minnesota right now with Gobert, and who knows where that situation goes. I got one swing at moving 4 first-round picks in a deal here. So you do have to be careful when one of these marquee guys become available here, because if you miss out, it will really cost you.
I would ask on that note, right? And I brought this topic up on a previous show. And in terms of why the Knicks are in such a tricky spot, because as you mentioned, Denver, they didn't have to go for the home run, but they also had their 3 draft picks, from Jokic to becoming, an all-time great, to Murray becoming one of the best point guards in the league, Porter Jr. becoming a good shooter. He still has to ascend a little bit as a third guy. But if you look at all the NBA champions since forever, it's all started with their homegrown talent. From Denver, Milwaukee was with Giannis, Golden State, their big 3. Even the Celtics run started with a Paul Pierce being a homegrown talent. They got Rondo as a rookie. They turned Al Jefferson into Kevin Garnett. So I think that's why the Knicks are in a tricky spot, because their rookies have yet to really establish themselves as guys that, you can keep here as a foundation for a true championship contender. And that's why I think it's important for RJ Barrett to try to take a next step. You sign Quickly. Maybe he has another level that he can get to. We'll see what Grimes can do. I think it's important that those guys continue to develop for the betterment of the team down the road.
No, that's a great point. I mean, and that makes it harder for you to get rid of one of your younger players, for one of those, those marquee guys.
Bobby, I heard you talking about Christian Brown on ESPN and the way that he has played for the Nuggets, and the Nuggets hitting on a draft pick, and how important that is for them, and it is for big spending teams in this league. I'm just wondering, given the importance of drafting well and draft picks, do you think the Knicks picks increased in value given the CBA and all the ramifications of big spending and the importance of picks? You think they increased in value at all, or do they stay the same?
I mean, just look what Denver did with Oklahoma City, right? I mean, the Nuggets window to win a championship is right now, and then for them to move another pick in 2029 to get, the 37th pick and a future second and a 2024 first from Oklahoma City, that brings them tremendous value right now. Where on the other end, a team like Oklahoma City parlayed the now into the future, because eventually you're going to have to pay Gilgeous-Alexander again, Josh Giddey, some of those players. Who knows what happens with Chet Holmgren here, and their cost eventually gets higher here. So I think for New York, it's a matter of where our costs are going down the road. If that Brunson number is going to get higher, if we have a Bradley Beal on our roster here, where those picks become extremely, extremely valuable, because you won't be able to go out and add outside of, your own players here. When, Denver went out and got Christian Brown. They went out and got Peyton Watson, who I haven't seen. Brown came in and played and had an impact. And that's why I think going into this draft, you're looking at teams like Miami at 18, Golden State at 19, the Clippers at 30. who are looking that you got to get guys that can come in right now and play, whether it be 3 or 4 year players. What Denver did this past year.
Do you expect, based on the new CBA rules, do you expect, because it'll certainly hamstring the teams in terms of acquiring players, but on the operation side, you can spend unlimited amounts. Do you expect teams to invest more in scouting, in analytics, in draft, in player development based on the new CBA?
You have to. I mean, the draft is the great unknown. It's so hard. I mean, it's like even the best miss out on players here. But I think whether it be from an international pool or from collegiate, or I think it's important that you got to get it right. Like you can't say, what, we'll miss out. We'll take a flyer on a young player, and hopefully 2 years from now or 3 years from now, he'll develop into this high level rotational player. I just think how everything is moving forward here. You need guys that can kind of come in and play right now. And I think, as you said, there's no cap as far as how much you can spend from a scouting perspective, from a player development perspective, from a health perspective here. And I think you will see teams invest more in that.
I could talk to you guys for 3 more hours about the Knicks and the NBA, but we're going to wrap here. I'm going to keep it short here. Quick question for both of you. One word answer, CP. Do you want to see the Knicks go after Zion Williamson if he becomes available? Yes or no?
No.
That was four.
I don't know if I have a quick
emphatic no, and I like it.
I don't know if I have a quick answer for you. I don't.
No, Bobby, I got a different one for you, my friend.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Leon Rose, letter grade so far: A, B, C, D, F.
B+. I think the big thing with Leon, and I know everything was, when James Dolan hired him, hey, attract star players. I just think he has an inner working of who these players are as people and what best fits for that locker room. And I know certainly the CAA connection is going to be brought up, whether it be with Josh Hart or with Brunson or with Randle or some of these. I don't care. For me, I don't care. Like, if these guys can play, they can play. I don't care who they're represented here. And I think certainly for a B+ for me, and I think to get to the A is going to have to take some risk here, right? To get to the A is going to have to be a chance type move for them to make here.
Yeah, they've been relatively risk averse thus far under Mr. Rose, but let's see if that changes as we get into the draft and the offseason. Bobby Marks, ESPN front office insider, CP, the Fanchise, Knick Fan TV. I thank you both very much for your time. We'll be back with another episode of the